What would you do if someone you trusted, someone you'd welcomed into your home, someone who had your house key, turned out to be plotting your murder? In July 2005, in Jacksonville, Florida, Carol and Reggie Sumner lived their retired life in peace. They were high school sweethearts who found each other again after decades apart. At 61 years old, both dealing with severe health issues, they thought they'd finally found their safe haven. They were wrong. On a warm summer evening, July 8th, the Sumners vanished from their suburban home. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no blood, just gone. Their cars remained in the driveway. Their medications sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Their family couldn't reach them. Something was terribly wrong. When police arrived, they found a house that looked normal, almost too normal. The beds were made. Dishes were done. But Carol's purse was missing, and so was Reggie's wallet. Within hours, their bank accounts showed unusual activity, withdrawals in places the disabled couple would never go. 4 young people were watching the Sumners for weeks. They knew their routine. They knew when they took their medications. They knew the couple's vulnerabilities. And they had a plan. A plan so cruel, it would shake even the most hardened detectives. Among these 4 was someone the Sumners knew well. Someone they'd helped before. Someone they trusted. That trust would lead Carol and Reggie Sumner to a shallow grave in Georgia, where they would face their final moments together. This is a true story of how ordinary kindness met extraordinary evil, of how a simple house key became an instrument of death, of how 4 young people chose to commit an act so horrific it would haunt their quiet Florida community forever. "3 days. That's how long Carol and Reggie Sumner had been missing before anyone realized something was wrong. 3 days during which their bank accounts were being drained, their credit cards maxed out, and their lives hung in the balance. The facts were troubling. Carol Sumner, 61, battling multiple sclerosis, needed daily medication to manage her condition. Reggie Sumner, also 61, suffered chronic pain from a devastating car accident years before. They weren't the type of people who could just get up and leave. They weren't the type of people who would abandon their medications, their home, their family. When Jacksonville police entered their home on July 11, 2005, the scene raised immediate red flags. The house was immaculate. Too immaculate, as if someone had cleaned it thoroughly. The couple's cars sat in the driveway, untouched. Their medications remained on the kitchen counter, doses missed for days. Their beloved dog was alone, unfed. The responding officers knew immediately. This wasn't a typical missing persons case. The Sumners hadn't simply decided to take an impromptu vacation. They hadn't chosen to disconnect from their family. Something had happened in this house. Something terrible. Bank records would soon tell part of the story. Multiple ATM withdrawals across Jacksonville. Credit card charges in South Carolina. Gas station purchases. Hotel rooms. But Carol and Reggie weren't making these transactions. They couldn't have been. Their family knew they barely left their home due to their disabilities. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered the Sumners had recently moved to Jacksonville from South Carolina. They'd sold their previous home there just months before. And the buyer? A young woman named Tiffany Cole. A woman who still had a key to their new house. That key would prove to be the first thread in unraveling this mystery. A mystery that would lead investigators across state lines, into the dark world of 4 young killers, and eventually to a remote wooded area in Georgia, where Carol and Reggie Sumner had spent their final, terrifying moments. Carol and Reggie's story began like many great love stories in high school. They were young, in love, and thought they had their whole lives ahead of them together. But life had other plans. After graduation, they drifted apart, married other people, lived separate lives. For 40 years, they carried memories of their first love, never knowing their paths would cross again. In 2000, fate intervened. Both divorced and dealing with health challenges, Carol and Reggie reconnected. It was as if time had stood still. The spark was still there, and within months, they married. Friends said they acted like teenagers in love, despite their physical limitations. Carol faced each day with remarkable strength, even as multiple sclerosis gradually took control of her body. Her hands would shake when she tried to write. Walking became increasingly difficult, but Reggie was always there, supporting her, even through his own struggles with chronic pain from a devastating car accident that had left him partially disabled. They lived on fixed incomes, disability checks, and modest savings. Every dollar mattered. Every expense was carefully considered. But they had each other, and that seemed enough. In late 2004, they made a decision that would unknowingly seal their fate. Their South Carolina home had become too much to maintain. Jacksonville, Florida promised warmer weather, which would be easier on their conditions. They found a small house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just one story, easier for Carol to navigate. Their new neighbors quickly grew fond of the couple who, despite their challenges, always had a kind word or a warm smile to share. The Sumners were creatures of habit, as many older couples are. They rarely went out after dark. They kept their medications organized in daily containers. They lived carefully, cautiously, aware of their vulnerabilities. Each morning, Reggie would help Carol with her exercises. Each evening, they'd sit together on their porch, watching the sunset. Their children worried about them living alone, but the Sumners valued their independence. They took precautions, or so they thought. They were careful about who they trusted, or so they believed. But there was one trust they extended that would prove fatal: a spare key given to the young woman who bought their South Carolina home, Tiffany Cole. In their final months, the Sumners had created a peaceful life in Jacksonville. They had their routines, their medications, their quiet evenings together. They'd finally found their happy ending after 40 years apart. But while they were building their new life, 4 young people were watching, planning, waiting. The Sumners' disabilities made them perfect targets. Their trusting nature made them vulnerable. Their fixed income made them predictable. Every aspect of their quiet, careful life, details they thought kept them safe, would be used against them in ways they could never have imagined. July 8, 2005. Jacksonville police received a call that would trigger one of their most disturbing investigations. The Sumners' daughter reported her parents missing. The initial response was measured. After all, adults have the right to go wherever they want. But as Detective Johnson listened to the family's concerns, the red flags began mounting. "Mom and Dad haven't answered their phone in 3 days," their daughter explained. "Dad missed his doctor's appointment. Mom's medication is still on the counter. They would never leave their dog alone like this." Within hours of the missing persons report, the Sumners Bank called their family. Multiple ATM withdrawals had triggered fraud alerts. $1,000 here, $500 there. Maximum daily limits, drawn out at various locations across Jacksonville. For a couple who rarely left their neighborhood, who carefully budgeted every dollar of their fixed income, these transactions stood out like alarm bells. Security footage from the ATMs showed strangers using the Sumners' cards. Not Carol, with her distinctive MS-induced tremors. Not Reggie, who walked with a noticeable limp. Young people, confident, casual, using stolen cards like they belonged to them. The investigation shifted quickly. This wasn't a case of elderly parents taking an unannounced vacation. Someone had the Sumners' bank cards. Someone had access to their PIN numbers. Someone knew enough about their lives to take advantage of them. Jacksonville Police Detective Williams recalls walking through the Sumners' house that first day. Everything was too clean. Like someone had methodically erased their presence. The bed was made with military precision. The kitchen counters were spotless. Even the trash had been taken out. In missing persons cases, that level of cleanliness is usually a bad sign. Credit card records painted a disturbing picture. Charges appeared in South Carolina. Hotel rooms booked. Gas stations, restaurants, a strange trail leading north, while Carol and Reggie were nowhere to be found. The family provided critical information. The Sumners had recently moved from South Carolina. They'd sold their house there to a young woman. They'd mentioned her visiting recently, Tiffany Cole. She had a key to their new house. They trusted her. That name, Tiffany Cole, would soon become the center of this investigation. But even as detectives began looking into her background, they couldn't imagine the horror they would uncover. They couldn't know that with each passing hour, with each transaction traced, with each security camera reviewed, they were building evidence for what would become one of Florida's most shocking crimes. Time was critical. If the Sumners were being held somewhere, their medical conditions made every hour crucial. Carol needed her MS medication. Reggie needed his pain management drugs. But as investigators would soon discover, medicine was the least of their concerns. Tiffany Ann Cole, a former neighbor of Carol and Reggie Sumner, was the mastermind behind the horrific crime that would end the couple's lives. At just 23 years old, Cole had a prior relationship with the Sumners, having known them when they lived in South Carolina. The Sumners had even sold her a vehicle and welcomed her into their home during her visits to Jacksonville. This familiarity provided Cole with critical insights into the couple's vulnerabilities, which she exploited in a sinister plan that involved robbery and murder. Cole's connection to the Sumners was not merely casual. It was built on trust. The couple, both in their early 60s and suffering from health issues, were unaware of the danger lurking in their former neighbor. Cole had maintained contact with them after they moved to Jacksonville, and during her visits, she learned about their financial situation, including a recent profit from selling their home in South Carolina. This information would prove fatal. Cole did not act alone. She was joined by 3 accomplices: Michael Jackson, Cole's boyfriend at the time, who played a significant role in executing the plan; Alan Wade, a friend of Jackson's who helped carry out the robbery and kidnapping; Bruce Nixon, another accomplice who assisted in the crime, and later provided crucial testimony against Cole and Jackson. Together, this group formulated a plan that would lead to one of Florida's most shocking murders. The group's plot was chillingly calculated. They decided to rob the Sumners based on the knowledge Cole had gathered about their daily routines and vulnerabilities. Preparation. Just days before the crime, they dug a grave in a remote area of Georgia, indicating premeditation. They purchased duct tape and other supplies needed for the abduction. The invasion, on July 8, 2005, Wade and Nixon approached the Sumners' home under false pretenses, asking to use the phone. Once inside, they brandished a toy gun and bound Carol and Reggie with duct tape. Execution. After securing the couple, they forced them into the trunk of their own car. The group then drove to the pre-dug gravesite, where they buried Carol and Reggie alive after extracting their bank pins. The brutality of this crime shocked investigators and highlighted how trust could be manipulated into something deadly. As law enforcement pieced together this horrifying narrative through surveillance footage and witness testimonies, it became clear that this was not just a robbery gone wrong, but a calculated act of violence against two vulnerable individuals. On that fateful day, the Sumners were unsuspecting as they went about their routine. Tiffany Cole's accomplices, Michael Jackson and Alan Wade, arrived at the couple's home under the guise of needing assistance. Once inside, they revealed their true intentions. Armed with a toy gun, they threatened Carol and Reggie, forcing them into submission. The couple, already frail due to their health issues, were quickly overpowered. The invaders bound their hands and feet with duct tape, stripping them of their autonomy and instilling a deep sense of fear. The scene inside the Sumners' home was chaotic. The invaders rifled through drawers and cabinets, searching for valuables, while the elderly couple remained helplessly restrained. It was a violation of not just their home, but also their sense of safety. With the Sumners incapacitated, the criminals turned their attention to financial gain. They demanded that Carol and Reggie provide access to their bank accounts. Under duress, the couple revealed their PIN numbers. The perpetrators then drove Carol and Reggie to various ATMs across Jacksonville, forcing them to withdraw cash against their will. Surveillance footage from these ATMs captured the chilling moments when the Sumners' cards were used by strangers, young individuals who had no connection to the couple. Each withdrawal was methodical, with amounts carefully calculated to avoid immediate suspicion while draining the couple's accounts. After extracting money from the Sumners' accounts, the group made a fateful decision. They would transport Carol and Reggie out of state. They loaded the terrified couple into the trunk of their own car and set off for Georgia. During this drive, the Sumners were subjected to further humiliation and fear as they realized the gravity of their situation. The journey was marked by a chilling silence, interrupted only by the sounds of Carol and Reggie's muffled cries for help. The criminals maintained an air of calmness, knowing they had complete control over the elderly couple's fate. Upon reaching a secluded area in Georgia, the group stopped at a pre-dug grave, a site that had been prepared days in advance. The horror escalated as they forced Carol and Reggie out of the trunk. In a final act of brutality, they bound them again and buried them alive in that grave. The act was not just a murder. It was an utter disregard for human life. As dirt filled the grave, Carol and Reggie's pleas faded into silence, marking a tragic end to their lives, filled with love and resilience. As investigators began piecing together evidence from various leads, one crucial breakthrough came from Bruce Nixon. After being apprehended by police during a separate incident, Nixon confessed to his involvement in the crime. His detailed account provided law enforcement with essential insights into what had transpired on that fateful day. Nixon's confession was pivotal. He revealed not only his role, but also implicated Tiffany Cole and Michael Jackson in the planning and execution of the crime. His willingness to cooperate with authorities opened doors for further investigation. Following Nixon's confession, police launched an extensive search based on his directions. They scoured remote areas in Georgia until they finally uncovered a grave that matched Nixon's description. The discovery was harrowing. It confirmed investigators' worst fears. Carol and Reggie Sumner had been buried there. The site was meticulously examined for evidence. Forensic teams worked tirelessly to gather any physical evidence that could link Cole and her accomplices to this heinous act. Once forensic teams confirmed that human remains were present in the grave, they proceeded with care to recover them respectfully. The identification process was agonizing for family members who had been searching for answers since July 8th. Ultimately, through dental records and other means, authorities confirmed that the remains belonged to Carol and Reggie Sumner. This grim confirmation brought both closure and devastation to their family. Closure in knowing what had happened, but devastation at losing two beloved family members in such a brutal manner. With solid evidence now in hand, including Nixon's confession and physical proof from the burial site, investigators began building a case against Tiffany Cole and her accomplices. They collected surveillance footage from ATMs showing unauthorized withdrawals, witness testimonies from family members who provided insight into Cole's relationship with the Sumners, forensic evidence from the gravesite that linked all four individuals involved in this crime. As detectives pieced together this horrifying puzzle, they prepared for what would become a high-profile trial, a quest for justice for Carol and Reggie Sumner that would reverberate throughout their community. The investigation into the disappearance of Carol and Reggie Sumner quickly led to the arrest of Tiffany Cole, Michael Jackson, Alan Wade, and Bruce Nixon. On July 14, 2005, just days after the couple was reported missing, law enforcement tracked the suspects to a motel in Charleston, South Carolina, where they were found using the Sumners' stolen ATM cards. The Duval County grand jury indicted Cole on multiple charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed kidnapping, and 2 counts of armed robbery. The severity of the charges reflected the heinous nature of the crime, particularly given that the Sumners were buried alive. Tiffany Cole's trial commenced in October 2007. The prosecution presented a compelling case that highlighted the premeditated nature of the crime. Evidence included surveillance footage of ATM withdrawals made with the Sumners' cards and testimonies from witnesses who had seen Cole and her accomplices in the days leading up to the murders. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The prosecution argued that Cole had orchestrated the entire plan, leveraging her prior relationship with the Sumners to gain their trust before betraying them in such a brutal manner. On March 6, 2008, Tiffany Cole was sentenced to death for her role in the murders of Carol and Reggie Sumner. The jury had recommended the death penalty by a vote of 9-3, citing several aggravating factors, including the heinousness of burying the victims alive. Cole's co-defendants faced similar fates. Michael Jackson and Alan Wade were also sentenced to death, while Bruce Nixon received a 45-year prison sentence for his cooperation with authorities. During sentencing, family members of Carol and Reggie Sumner delivered emotional impact statements. They spoke about the profound loss and grief they experienced due to the brutal nature of their loved ones' deaths. The courtroom was filled with tears as they described how Carol and Reggie had been loving parents and grandparents who deserved a peaceful retirement. The impact statements underscored not only the personal loss, but also a broader community outrage over such a violent crime occurring in their neighborhood. This sentiment resonated throughout Jacksonville as residents grappled with feelings of vulnerability and fear. The murders of Carol and Reggie Sumner sent shockwaves through Jacksonville and beyond. Community members expressed disbelief that such a horrific act could happen to a couple known for their kindness. Vigils were held in their memory, drawing attention to issues surrounding safety for vulnerable populations, particularly seniors living alone. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, prompting discussions about crime prevention and community vigilance. The case highlighted the need for greater awareness regarding personal safety measures for elderly individuals. In response to this tragedy, community organizations began implementing safety awareness programs aimed at educating seniors about potential scams and home invasions. Workshops were organized to teach older adults how to recognize suspicious behavior and protect themselves from becoming victims. Law enforcement agencies also increased outreach efforts, encouraging residents to report any unusual activity in their neighborhoods. This proactive approach aimed to foster a sense of community responsibility in safeguarding its members. The aftermath for Carol and Reggie's family was devastating. Their daughter, Rhonda Alford, became an advocate for victims' rights, sharing her family's story in hopes of raising awareness about violent crimes against seniors. She emphasized the importance of community support systems that could help prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. The emotional toll on the family was profound. They struggled with grief while navigating legal proceedings against those responsible for their parents' deaths. Rhonda's resilience became a testament to her parents' legacy as she worked tirelessly to honor their memory. In honor of Carol and Reggie Sumner, memorial efforts were established within their community. A scholarship fund was created to support local students pursuing careers in criminal justice or social work, fields dedicated to helping others and preventing violence. Additionally, annual memorial events were organized to keep their memory alive within Jacksonville. These gatherings served as reminders not only of their tragic story, but also as calls to action for stronger community bonds and safety measures.